Roof Together, Online Worship, Summer at the Movies, August 1st, 2021. Give Me a Sign, based on the movie Bruce Almighty. Our welcome this morning is from Paul Voss Fosdick.
Welcome to the Rogue Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, or RUF. I'm Paul Vosdick, or Voz. Welcome to our online service. We hold these online services when we cannot gather in person together. We are so glad you are here. Whether you're alone or with loved ones, please get comfortable and worship here with us. We at RUF remind ourselves that we gather here on the land that is the traditional homes of the Shasta, Takalma, and Lagawa peoples, as well as others who are relocated here against their will. The people indigenous to this land are part of our communities and live with the ongoing consequences of conquest, colonization, and oppression. We stop for a moment to acknowledge this and to express our commitment to work for justice for all. Welcome to our service, and know we are all together. Maybe not in person, but definitely in spirit.
As part of our mission at RUF, we collect an extra offering on the first Sunday of the month for the Ashland Emergency Food Bank. The food bank has been in Ashland for 45 years and is adapting to this time of pandemic by creating outdoor shopping spaces for folks to gather the food that they need to make it through. As always, the food bank is accepting non-perishable and canned items to stock their shelves. But what they most need is cash donations so that they can provide all sorts of food to nourish people well and to keep them healthy. To donate to the Ashland Emergency Food Bank, send your check to Ashland Emergency Food Bank, or AEFB, at Post Office Box 3578, Ashland, Oregon 97520. Or you can donate at ashlandefb.org/donations. Thank you so much for your generosity and your support.
Our chalice lighting this morning is Forged in the Fire of Our Coming Together by Gretchen Haley, read by Reverend Lara Campbell.
Our chalice lighting today comes from the Reverend Gretchen Haley. It's titled Forged in the Fire of Our Coming Together. What's going on? Will everything be okay? What can I do? In these days, we find ourselves too often stuck with these questions on repeat. What's going to happen? Will everything be okay? What can I do? We grasp at signs and markers, articles of news and analysis, Facebook memes and forwarded emails, as if the new zodiac, capable of forecasting all that life may yet bring our way, as if we could prepare, as if life had ever made any promises of making sense or turning out the way we thought, as if we were not also actors in this still unfolding story. For this hour together, we surrender to the mystery, to release ourselves from needing to know, the yearning to have it already figured out, and also the burden of believing we each have all the control or none. Here in our song, in our silence, our stories, and our sharing, we make space for a new breath, a new healing, a new possibility to take root. That is courage, my friends. Courage to forge in the fire of our coming together and felt in the spirit that comes alive in this act of faith, that we still believe a new world is possible, that we are creating it already here and now. In this spirit, we light our chalice.
Our opening song is Enter, Rejoice, and Come In. Let us sing. Let us sing, 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 let us sing
rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your ears to the song. Open your ears to the song. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your hearts, everyone. Open your hearts, everyone. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in.
Our Peace Candle words include our Unitarian Universalist sixth principle, read by Allison Cole Duran Sutherland. The ritual of lighting a candle each week for peace was brought to the Rogue Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship by Reverend Nan White, our developmental minister, before Reverend Sean. Reverend Nan had developed this ritual as a response to the ongoing war in Afghanistan. Now, 20 years later, U.S. troops have pulled out of Afghanistan. So, what does it mean that we light a candle for peace? It means that each week we take a moment to lift up our sixth principle, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. This is core to who we are and what we believe.
Peace, salam, shalom. Peace, salam, shalom. Peace, salam, shalom. Peace, salam, shalom.
Our time for all ages this morning is told by Allison Duran Sutherland with words and images from Amy Allen. I met Amy Allen and we became friends on Facebook because we both go to Star King School for the Ministry, where I'm learning how to be a Unitarian Universalist minister. I became so inspired by the signs of love that Amy found and posted on Facebook, with messages that these signs of love had given her. Love is everywhere. Sometimes it's where you park for a while. Love is everywhere. Sometimes it's worn. Love is everywhere. Sometimes it's puzzling. Love is everywhere. Sometimes it's tangy. For myself, the idea that God is love, whatever that means, is central to my Universalist faith. So it made sense to me that a Unitarian Universalist seminary colleague would see signs of love all over the place. Love is everywhere. Sometimes it's structured. Love is everywhere. Sometimes it makes you cry. Sometimes I wonder if signs are just the things we're paying attention to. Like, if you really believe in love, you'll see. Love is everywhere. Sometimes it's good to start your day. Love is everywhere. Sometimes it's fresh. Love is everywhere. Sometimes it's rocky. Love is everywhere. Sometimes it gets between your toes. Love is everywhere. Sometimes it has a baby. Love is everywhere. Sometimes it goes with the grain. Love is everywhere. Sometimes it gets run over. Love is everywhere. Sometimes it leaves an imprint. I'm so grateful to Amy for letting me use her words and her pictures in this Time for All Ages this morning. As I went through Amy's post to collect all of them for you, I found her very first post from February of 2020, and it surprised me. Love is everywhere. I don't necessarily believe that, but it came to me, so there we go. But whether she believed it or not, once Amy saw the sign, she couldn't help but see it everywhere. Our Sunday morning offering is an invitation into the practice of generosity on behalf of this beloved community, the Rogue Valley UU Fellowship. You can send your gift to Ruth by mail, 87 4th Street, Ashland, Oregon, 97520. You can also donate online at tinyurl.com/Ruth offering. You can even text the amount of your gift to 541-229-4229. So if you want to donate $100, you can text 100 to that number. For these and all the gifts you bring to this community and the world, thank you. Our reading is Our Whole Life is a Series of Signs by Jake Morrell, read by Reverend Lara Campbell.
Our reading today is from Jake Morrell, a UU minister. It's entitled Our Whole Life as a Series of Signs. He starts with a quote, "The greater the feeling of inferiority that has been experienced, the more powerful is the urge for conquest and the more violent the emotional agitation." That is from Alfred Adler, an early Austrian therapist. Jake says, "I worked in a group home in Coralville, Iowa. It was for teens who could no longer live where they'd come from. From the outside, you'd hear screams. It was that kind of home. All the staff had short hair, otherwise a resident could grab it, smash your head against something. My favorite, Trey, used his own head on you. I learned this once when I had him in a hold. He ducked his head forward and then sent it back hard, and my teeth hurt for a week. I learned to look for disaster," Jake says, "to steer away from situations that would set Trey off. We'd take to the sidewalks and sing country songs. Strawberry Wine was on the radio then. It was what we loved most. I knew the verses. He'd join in out loud, only on the word wine. To hell with the neighbors. I just thought glad that he wasn't inside breaking stuff. Can you blame him? His heart was ripped out. Fridays, he stood at the front window waiting on family that would never arrive, and then he'd erupt. Anyone would have, even you, even me. But Trey didn't have words. He spoke in flying lamps and end tables and flung puzzle boxes. It wasn't chaos, the wreckage. If you looked, it meant something. Later years, I fell for Alfred Adler, the Austrian therapist who broke it off from Freud. He said all behavior is meaningful. It has context and purpose. Our whole life is a series of signs. Any slight action, a dim semaphore, likewise. The psychiatrist James Gillian, having interviewed people in prison for doing violent harm, said their crimes were actually a form of communication, an attempt to mean something, to be heard, to be known. If someone studied the aftermath of our own life's disaster, maybe they'd pick out a pattern, some meaning in it. Through the crackle, the noise, maybe they'd detect a faint signal of our own falling heart. Our redemption, if it happens, will mean somebody tried.
This morning's sharing is Give Me a Sign from Reverend Lara Campbell.
Early one Sunday morning, I was on I-95 South, headed to co-lead a worship service at the UU Church in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. It was one of those cool fall mornings when the sun is shining through the thin early morning clouds. And as I drove down the turnpike, I saw a big flashing warning sign. You know, the kind that's put up to warn you of construction or to tell you not to text when you're driving. But this one stated something I had never seen before. It informed me, deceased animal in the roadway at mile 14. I began to mentally prepare for this, right? What kind of animal could it be? Maybe it was a deer or maybe even a moose. I was sad about the loss of the creature's life and also aware of the danger that it posed. I paid close attention as the mile markers went by. 18, 17, 16. At mile 15, my senses started to heighten. I started to scan the horizon back and forth for some kind of activity, anticipating a blocked lane with a crew moving an animal, but there was nothing ahead. I started to doubt myself. Had I read the sign right? Maybe I misread it. Maybe I was mistaken. Maybe I needed to start drinking caffeinated coffee in the morning. And then at about mile 13.8, I saw it. And in an incredibly irreverent moment, I began to laugh. The deceased animal in the middle of Interstate 95, the one that I had anticipated, was a squirrel. Now, I do not mean to diminish the tragedy of the impact of vehicular traffic on the creatures in our environment. It was just that this was clearly not the animal that the sign had warned me about. I'm left to guess that maybe a larger animal had already been moved out of the roadway before I got there and they hadn't taken the sign down. But when I saw that sign, I made an assumption. And over the next 4 or so miles, I had constructed this entire story about what I was going to see. I was coaching myself on how I was going to deal with it. I was ready to slow myself down and possibly move over and maybe even feel some distress about the accident because I had seen the sign and I was ready to respond. So, no, I wasn't laughing at the squirrel in the road. I was laughing at myself. You know, signs can play an important role for people. We look for literal or symbolic indications or even hints to help us understand our lives, to give us direction, to give us hope in our darkest moments. We want to find some sort of explanation. or give us some broader sense of understanding about what this life is all about. We long to know if we are on the right or the wrong path. We live by signs to let us know if we're heading in the positive direction, like a good grade in school or a promotion or a raise at work, or a friend who calls you up just out of the blue to say hi and lets you know that you matter. We look for signs when we're trying to make decisions about the next steps in our life. Maybe you've said it or heard it, someone else say it. It's a sign. It's a sign when something coincidental happens or a whole day goes really well or really bad. Sometimes we think it's a sign. And though it doesn't tell the whole story, a sign may be just that little nudge that we need, that reassurance that we crave. It can allow us to keep going or to check ourselves, to recalculate and head in a totally different direction. Now, in a sermon by W. Frank Allen, he talks about how we live by signs even more when we're in times of despair or difficulty, in times when life seems to be offering up defeat or victory. We look for signs that reveal what's really possible and what we're capable of as people and as a community. All of this has me wondering, what is this all about? What is it that causes us, that causes myself included, to look to things like some of the methods that were talked about earlier for reassurance? This desire to know is as old as we know. It's found in many ancient texts and stories. Frankly, a search found that there were 96 references to sign in the Bible and 101 occurrences in the Quran. Countless therapy sessions, millions of hours in study and prayer, oh, so many long walks, all focused on trying to satiate our need to know. And we, as Unitarian Universalists, are not immune to this search. We can find it, in fact, in our fourth principle, the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Or we can list some of those places that we look for our signs in our 6 sources, don't we? This desire to know, this search, can make us vulnerable. We've all heard of people who convince hundreds, even thousands, that they are a prophet of God because of the signs they're supposedly are able to perform or witnessed. Well-meaning people flock to them because they seem to seek that sign. Occasionally, humans step in to offer a sign. A few years ago, a well-known Minnesota, very conservative politician announced that they would consider running for the U.S. Senate, quote, if God gives me the sign. Well, thelordabove.com, also known as God on Facebook, provided an answer for this politician. The satirist raised over $7,000 and took out a billboard in the politician's home state. The sign read, Midwestern conservative politician name, capital N, capital O, period, signed God. Now, apparently, the particular politician did not respond to this sign. Sometimes people send us signs that are intended to be helpful. Other times, it's really about their own agenda. Sometimes we correctly interpret them, and sometimes we don't. And one of the dangers of looking so hard for a sign is that while we are searching for the sign, we might end up missing the actual truth that is right in front of us. Hearing a voice when we're alone or seeing something that nobody else can see is actually pretty common. Chania Marie Luhrmann, a professor at Stanford University in California, does anthropological and psychological research. And she reports that at least 1 in 10 people will say that they've had such an experience if you ask them bluntly. Science may not be able to tell us where these voices come from, but it can tell us that many of these events are normal, part of the fabric of human perception. And history tells us that those experiences enable people to choose paths that they should choose, but for various reasons they had hesitated to make that choice. So how can we know? How can we make sure that what we are seeing and interpreting is the sign is actually correct? That we're not looking for the proverbial moose and finding a squirrel in the road. A Huffington Post blog by Stephanie Zamora, she talks about how our mind can interfere with our interpretations of our feelings when it comes to seeing and understanding the signs that we are given. The mind can easily argue, she says, sway and support each option or direction without problems. It's logical, it's rational, and can weigh the pros and cons like a champ, but it can't feel what's right for you. When you let your mind do the sign reading, suddenly you may be even more overwhelmed by the possibilities and the potential signs. Stephanie encourages us to engage in the age-old practice of meditation as a way to determine what our next steps should be. She believes that we are better to look for those signs that come from within rather than external cues. And she has a 4-step process that includes being clear on what you need guidance for, asking specific questions rather than a generalized request, releasing that request, sending it off, and that the truth will then be able to be heard, engaging in the present, using your intuition that lives in your body. And if you want to know the answers and be able to receive them, you need to be engaged in it, not just engaged in your mind. And finally, stay open and receptive. If you have to think about whether or not it's a sign, it's probably not. If something is said or comes on your radar that sparks a physical reaction, a clear sense of truth, you have your answer. Listen to that. Now, these signs may be literal or symbolic or indications or just kind of little hints. They may come from your understanding of a higher spiritual being, from internal knowing self, or from intuition. This desire to understand has been around for as long as we have been able to document our existence. And what matters most is not if they are true or rational, if they happen or they don't. What matters is that they help us understand our lives, to give us direction and give us hope in our darkest moments. How we choose to use these signs is completely up to us. Blessed be and amen.
Let us sing our closing song, Woyaya by Osibisa.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. We are going. Heaven knows where we are going, but we know we're there, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah, 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 oh yeah, 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 oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
We now extinguish the chalice with Reverend Lara Campbell.
Throughout the ages, we humans have been flinging our arms up to the heavens and crying out, "Give me a sign." And what we know is that when we are reading the signs and paying attention, the answers can be found in the most simple, ordinary, and amazing things.
You are invited to join us for Zoom Coffee Hour each Sunday at 11:30 a.m. Pacific. Sign up for our mailing list at roof.org to get details each week on how to join our Zoom room.